I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
The Truman Show is over. Somebody help me. I'm being spontaneous. I had very sad lines prepared for that. The lines that really represent what this movie is about for me. But I decided that to open the new season, Andy, that would be inappropriate.
Yeah, that would be dark. A dark way to kick things off.
Yeah. Because that's what we're doing. This is season 16. We are doing this again. And we've got a whole new slate of movies for this year. I'm very excited about it. And we're starting with The Truman Show as a part of my series called Platformed Lives.
Yeah. Tell us about this series of yours. What's the intention of it?
Did you have any thoughts about it? What do you think it means?
Well, it's performative. I just feel like, these are people who each, I guess you could say, have their own platform or their space in which they're performing or they're trying to capture performances. We're talking about The Truman Show, Nightcrawler, where Jake Gyllenhaal is a reporter who is totally okay going dark places in order to get the story. Mm-hmm. And then Sorry to Bother You, where we have a man who learns he has to speak in his white voice to actually do his sales at this new job of his. So there's I don't know. So I guess I'm curious what you're doing, but it seems like there's an element of performative nature and trying to have to perform because of whatever the corporations, the media, whatever it is, need from us.
I love that. I love that so much that if my original idea doesn't pan out, we're just going to go with yours. But originally, I had this idea about platformed lives being about consent and what platforms do to it and with it, right? It's about how being watched stops being something we all agree to and becomes something that's just plain done to us, right? And, Truman is the purest case for that arc, right? Consent isn't missing. It's impossible. He could never have said no in this universe, right? It was just obvious that he was always going to be watched because he was adopted by the corporations, the ultimate terms and conditions, adoption papers. And Nightcrawler is consent bypassed through tragedy, right? He's not getting consent by these people who are injured, having the very worst day of their lives. He's just taking it. And his excuse is news. But he's still stealing consent from these people and using it for wealth and building his platform. And Sorry to Bother You, consent is manufactured. It's industrial. It is, you have to sign, what's it called, worry-free, whatever their company consent form, and then he has to end up performing, and things go crazy in that movie as a result of what he agrees to do with his life as a part of his partnership with this organization. So all of these films are looking at our relationship to consent, and I'm curious what we end up being able to learn from these films about what platforms take from us today, right? As far as we know, you and I are not in The Truman Show, but our consent is definitely being manipulated, and I think these three films are an interesting look at how.
Yeah. I think I think that really says it, and I'm actually curious. You made me just start thinking about it. I'm like, there was that movie, I think it was called Not Okay with Zoe Deutsch that came out a few years ago about somebody who's wanting, I think she's trying to be bigger on social media and ends up in some situation where there's this fake, or there's this big event that happens, like a big traumatic event. And she is nearby or somehow fakes that somebody she was with had died in it or something, and ends up kind of creating this performative thing to kind of gain popularity. And it just seems like there are a lot of interesting stories, especially these days, as people are exploring how the changing landscape affects us and how we change who we are really because of it.
Well, and I'll just shout out Cam, which we just did on Sitting in the Dark as part of the AI Girlfriend Experience series. And a central tenet of Cam is the vileness that is allowed to be inflicted on a user as a result of agreeing to terms and conditions. And that's all consent. And I think it just makes for a really interesting, I think, thought experiment. And a day-to-day reminder. What am I saying yes to? What is just being inflicted? Because it's every day. It's every day.
True. Yeah.
So we start with Truman. And Truman is also a reckoning for us because you and I think it's fair to say, do adore this movie. And we've talked about it just between the two of us. We may have even seen it together. Who knows?
Likely.
And then we've never talked about it on this show. So it's also sort of a clearing of old debts. We saw on the show, we're going to be done with it and then we can move on with our lives.
The next reel can finally end now that we'll have covered the Truman Show.
I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, this is a great place to start off. And I think it's such an interesting one in the scope of reality television and how, reality TV had been around before this with The Real World on MTV that really kind of kicked things off, but really kind of went from there into expanding with more and more things, including some things that were much more long form, robust, like the Joe Schmo show. That's a hard one to say. What was the one with Cyclops, where he's the juror and everybody on it?
Pretty recent.
It's a much more recent one.
Was it the jury?
It might be the jury, but where everybody on it is they're all performing
actors,
except for
guy.
one guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the interesting element with these is how reality TV has kind of shifted in culture and what we expect from it, how we attach ourselves to it. This is a fascinating example in how we cut to the audience a number of times and see how the audience is actually reacting and connecting to the story of Truman and all of the different moments throughout. We've got recurring moments at the bar and the Truman bar, the old women sitting at their house, the guy in the bathtub, the two guys at the
security guards.
The security guards. So we see all these different people. But what's fascinating is by the time we get to the end of it and the show is cut and ends, they're like, well, let's see what else is on. And they instantly flip. And I think that's such an insight into how much we crave to have certain things, but how easy it is to change. I find that to be a fascinating element with this film.
I do too. I absolutely do. And I think that you picked out one of the great indictments of the universe with that last scene. Let's see what else is on. Like this whole movie is built up so big, everything's so big, and it is completely undone because of the fragility of patience and interest of the audience, right? And it's one of the reasons I think this movie is kind of magnificent in how well it has aged, right? This movie is not telling a dated story. It's telling a story that still resonates right now today. And that's a feat given how much technology has shifted. I think this movie is still telling an important story right now. And the fact that in 1998, this was just an extraordinary what if conversation. And now it's like Tuesday. It's Tuesday on YouTube. And that is an interesting mark. The parallel, do you remember, there have been the real life stories of, or the real life attempts at, I say real life, that is absolutely not true. What was the one about the girl who was she was vlogging, one of the early vloggers, and was it Lonely Girl?
I'm not sure.
YouTube.
Who was the same sort of thing though? They were trying to follow her.
Lonely Girl
24
15,
hours a day. Yeah.
Yes. So it was these. It was a story of these kids who were telling this story for years. It turns out people fell for it as like a War of the Worlds sort of thing. Like they fell for the fact that they thought it was real, and it turns out it was not. It was created by Miles Beckett, Mesh Flinders, Greg Goodfried, and Amanda Goodfried, and it was released from June 16th, 2006 to August 1st, 2008. And it told this story of this kid. It ended up moving into a science fiction kind of thriller scope, but early on it was just like a diary entry to get people interested, and it was enormously effective for a very short amount of time, doing a Truman Show kind of thing. She was a performer, but the actor, like the character she was playing, was freely giving of her consent to all of these, to the platforms to build interest in her life. And I that was another one that I was really kind of following at the time. I thought that was really interesting. Lonely Girl 15. Anyhow, I don't remember how I got off track on this. The fact that this movie has not aged a day. The big question for me, and this I think gets to, well, there are a couple of big questions that are wrapped in here. One, let's just say Christoph is not wrong. I don't think it's a real stretch to say that as a thought experiment, that the world outside is like no more real than the one he built, and it's probably not as safe. Is Truman's walk through the exit door a triumph, or is it just him walking into a new cage? And what is he actually choosing? And is it so obviously worth making that choice? And finally, what if he didn't choose? As an audience member, would you stick around and watch the show after Truman is in on the gag? I think those three questions are interesting to me.
Yeah, on the last one, then it becomes Ed TV, right, where he willingly is being followed around by cameras. I would assume that they don't have to necessarily then be as careful with their camera placement, all the hidden cameras everywhere. It's just cameras everywhere, right? And that may be a big shift. It also, I don't know, I think for Truman, walking out the exit door is still a triumph because he has never known anything but this space. And so for him, he's walking into, sure, I mean, yeah, the world outside is much bigger. You could say it's no more real than the one inside the space. Certainly is going to be more dangerous outside the place, especially for Truman, who came from this bubble and is now going into a place where he's going to be getting mobbed all the time because everybody knows who he is. And that's going to create a little bit of an issue for him. But I think it also, like, he's going into a space that he's never known before. And so you could, it's hard for me to say it's just a new cage when I think for him, he's moving into a place where he's now actively has so many more choices and things that he can just do whenever, places he can go whenever. I think it's going to be a very different experience for him. So it's hard for me to say it's just a new cage. That's the first and a little bit of the third question.
I think that the irony, the cruel irony is the most interesting television show is the one that happens after he leaves the the dome. Like if I were Christoph, I'd want to have 10,000 cameras immediately outside the dome.
Like all following him now.
Yeah. Yeah. Because now he gets to learn. He gets to, he's over his water thing, right? Like all of the crises that they implanted in him, the psychological traumas that they imbued in him to keep him in the town. Like now he gets to get over those things and figure out what living is all about. And he gets to learn that the people who said, I'm jumping ahead to one of my least favorite moments, which is the conversation between Marlon and Truman on the pier when Marlon says, I'd step in front of traffic for you, buddy. The one thing I would never do is lie to you. And he's saying that as Christoph is reading him the line in his earbud. That is extraordinary betrayal. And that's, maybe some of the biggest, straight up emotional trauma for him to get over is to figure out how to trust humanity again when his best friend for life is not telling him the truth ever.
it speaks to the mental space that the actors themselves have to get themselves into to perform on this show day in and day out for, at this point, 30 years, right? Like there's a lot of decisions that they have to make and things that they have to be okay with. Like Marlon has to be okay with, and Marlon is his character, his actor, his name in the Truman Show world. I can't remember what his actor name is. Noah Emmerich. But Noah Emmerich is the actor. But who's
right? He has 3 names.
Yeah, he has 3 names. Right. That's what I can't remember that name. But yes, anyway, Marlon had to be okay at some point, saying, "I'm going to be okay with lying to this guy because for the good of the show." Right. Yeah. Like all of these people have had to come to that space. Obviously, Meryl hasn't had too much of an issue with it. She's clearly just there for the notoriety, the money. Who knows? But she certainly seems okay with bailing, because when Truman starts cracking and she starts having to deal with those cracks as a performer, she's just like, I don't want to have to deal with this stuff. This is too much for me. You guys got to be taking better care of your performers here. Marlon seems a little better. I mean, we haven't seen Truman attack Marlon, so who knows? But still, I think Marlon seems to be in a better place to just say a better place, which is a terrible way to describe it, but a better place to say, I'm okay with just lying to this guy because it's the show that needs it, and that's my job. And that's a break in the world as far as people being able to say, yeah, we're creating a massive lie for this guy, and everything we do is for the good of the show. None of it is for the good of the human being.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So when you walk through, one of the things that was interesting to me, it's been several years since I've watched the movie, but when you walk through the major beats of Truman's, of the unraveling reality of Truman, it was surprising to me this round just how fast the veil begins being lifted for him. You could tell he's kind of already curious. Something is already a little bit amiss when the first light falls from the sky.
Right.
How ahead of the movie do you think you are at this point when that light falls?
Well, I mean, that's like inciting incident. That's like within the first 10 minutes of the film. So like
easy.
It's getting us to a place where we kind of get a sense. And by this point, we're walking into a movie we've seen the trailers for, so we already have a sense that we know where it's going to go. So I mean, it's hard to say, especially thinking back to 1998 when the movie came out, having walked into the theater. I mean, I feel like I pretty much already had a sense that the story is going to be about a guy who has been living this for 30 years and slowly figures out that his reality is not what he has always thought it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, I'm with you. I mean, I think that's kind of where I am too. This whole idea that, once that light falls, it kind of gives away everything. And then the trick of the movie is presenting artifice in a way that makes Truman's journey of being behind me as an audience member that much more exciting. Also, he's putting us in the position, like we're right alongside the security guards and the guy in the bath. The guy in the bath, he's in that bath for like 17
it's
hours.
Way too long.
It's a long bath.
Way too long, yeah.
The women in the home. Like that is, we're right there. Like we could look at each other and do our cutaways as we're watching this movie. And that is fantastic cinema on behalf of Peter Weir and Nickel. The fact that we're complicit from the jump. And then these things happen, and we get to watch Truman unravel in a way that, for me, is super, super authentic, and that he notices things just slightly behind us noticing them makes this feel like an incredibly real adventure. The biggest and I think probably the most important experience for that is for me is when we start seeing behind the scenes, where he begins his spontaneity, his journey of spontaneity, right? He's downtown and he tries to running into the bank and the elevator doors are open and it's clearly backstage.
There's craft service back there.
Craft services is back there. And then the security guards throw him out for no reason.
Yeah.
That ends up being, I think, a wonderful sort of fast forward on Truman's awareness that keeps us right up to speed with the unraveling of the film. It's so it ends up being a really well structured script. I want to remind you, I don't need to remind you, this is Andrew Niccol coming right off of Gattaca, first script after Gattaca produced, and not yet Simone, which we have
Simone. Yeah.
talked about.
Yeah. Yes, we have.
It may be worth a sidebar at some point on some of the parallels in terms of a discussion on Platform Lives between what Niccol is doing with these three movies, Gattaca, Truman Show, and Simone. I think he definitely is thinking some things that he's getting out in scripts in an interesting way for me.
Yeah. That's a great point. When you think about the performative nature that Ethan Hawke has to play as he's essentially kind of subbing for Jude Law, right?
Right.
So he genetically cleaning up after himself all the time and everything. And then, Simone, like the work that Al Pacino goes through to kind of create this fake actress. I mean, there's a lot of work that these people are doing. And so it's definitely something that Andrew Niccol is tapping into for sure at this point. So it's a pretty interesting space that he's in, that he's thinking about. Mm-hmm. What another element that speaks to kind of the performative nature of this that I think is really interesting is, we see when the film starts, we do see it kind of is beginning with it's like a news story sort of piece where we're seeing some interviews of some of the actors and we're getting a sense of like how the whole thing is built, right? But we're not actually seeing any of the machine as it goes. We just kind of get a few little lines at the beginning with even the fake credits almost like leading into a new episode that we as the audience are now watching, and we're kind of seeing how the whole thing plays. The cameras throughout are brilliantly designed to be all like hidden cameras. Like we see like a lot of really extreme wides from like a button angle, and
button angles
things
are the
like
best.
That. Or the trash can angle from the neighbor. Yeah. I love that. And so you get all sorts of these different things throughout. But what I find so fascinating is that we don't actually step into the world of Christoph until almost a full hour in the movie, like halfway point. Suddenly, we are back in the moon studio, I guess we'll just call it, as they're up in the sky overlooking everything that's going on and watching. And we get to see how he actually orchestrates and it's that scene where we have Marlon talking to Truman. And that's the moment that suddenly we almost like go through the earbud and we hear Christoph actually giving these directions to him. And it's an interesting moment to reveal that God angle, like that someone else is, the puppet master pulling on all the strings to make all the things go exactly the way he wants. I find that to be such a fascinating element of the story that it takes so long for us to actually step into that backside of it.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking about, is an hour too long to have waited? It's really patient to make us wait that long, especially when the first light falls within that first 10 minutes. We already know there is going to be a puppet master at some point. We've got to imagine we're going to see infrastructure. I think they waited that long because of the cool shot that it is when they zoom in on the moon and see that sort of translucence in the surface of the moon, and it's Christoph standing on that platform. It's an interesting play to put him, like, what did they say, 200 stories in the air, something like that. Like he's at the top of this dome, and from Christoph's perspective, he's over the ocean, looking down on this coastal town, and it seems like a weirdly impractical location for the crew to be sitting and for Christoph to be actually living. Because, I mean, in a way, Christoph is a mirror image of Truman, right? Because Christoph lives in that space. He's an enormous recluse. He never leaves. And he comes out to the control room to run the most dramatic moments, but the show goes 24/7. And he's aware of his own situation, but in many respects, all other respects, he's just as trapped.
Yeah, that's very true. He runs it all like God and plays up there with his little puppets down below. But yeah, he never seems to leave. I mean, like you said, he obviously goes and sleeps and stuff like that, but he walks in his robe at some point. So, I mean, he clearly is just living and sleeping, and his life is the show. His show is his life, and he is intrinsically tied to Truman just as much. And it makes you wonder at the end of it, what is he going to do? Does he know how to do anything else now?
Right, because he has to walk through the exit door too. And part of his conversation at the end of begging Truman, and it's not like a bend the knee kind of begging. It does seem like a genuine plea, is because he doesn't want to leave either, because he's not ready. Right, while Truman is ready, he's not ready. And there is an argument to be made that that's a kind of a clever way to introduce a father-son relationship, right? That he's not ready for his child, for his creation to go out into the world and to be free. And I think that's ends up being a pretty special trick of the performance that we get that relationship.
We get that relationship, but it is a dark twist on that relationship, because it is all about the need for him and his benefit that he has for running this. I mean, he's, what's the thing say, 10,910 days running? Like, it's never gone off the air until this one moment finally. And that speaks to the fact that this guy is kind of obsessed, and it's a little sick how he views Truman and his need for him. And I think that's in many ways, there's kind of that father-son relationship, but also you can look at it as a father-son relationship when you have a child performer and you have been working to train them as a performer, and suddenly they've turned 18 and they no longer want you in their life, and you've like trying to manage them all this time, and you ungrateful little brat sort of thing. It's like that you've created your own identity from their identity. Yeah.
Well, so we've got a couple of opportunities for others who feel their way through Truman's veil and feel like it's unfair for Truman to live in this bubble, and we should walk through those.
Yes.
In just a bit.
Yes. First, let's take a quick break. You can actually find the show over on YouTube, and you can join us live when we record. We will even take your questions in the post-show chit-chat, and members get the full post-show conversation and always know what to listen to next. Subscribe to The Next Reel on YouTube. The link to this episode is in the show notes. We'll be right back. I think Pete froze again. Nope, he's back.
It's always quick. It's always brief.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay, so there are people who want to tell Truman the truth. And there are always people who want to tell the truth. And some of them are real well-meaning people. Others just want the attention. And we get both in this movie. Do you have a favorite truth sayer?
I mean, I really enjoy the guy who pops out of the Christmas present.
It's the guy in the box.
He's like, Truman, you're on TV. I did it. I'm on the Truman Show. Like, all of that was really funny. That played very well. You got him. You got the parachuting person. And then, of course, you have Sylvia. And I suppose in some way you could say Dad, who maybe just wanted to write himself back into the show.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. He may be one of the more interesting ones, just briefly, because he started feeling bad and wanted to tell the truth and got himself written off the show, and then decided he wanted to be complicit in this after all. And so they wrote him back and became complete soap opera pulp. I don't know. That's an interesting take. The Sylvia Loren is the actress name. The actual actor is Natasha McClone. And she's great. She's got the perfect face for collage.
She's always great. I think the only other film we've talked about her is on the show is Ronin. Is that right?
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, I could watch that movie 100 times again.
Yeah, that's a great movie. I love Natasha McElhone. I think that she plays this well. I think that she is a great foil for Meryl, Truman's wife. I think the nature of that relationship in high school, I think in many ways, as an audience watching the film, we can see how written it feels. The Meryl kind of trips and, oh, I hurt my leg, and that whole thing, to kind of like the written meet cute that they have. But what I love so much about that whole moment, when we get the brilliant design of the flashback where Christoph actually has it all edited already, and he does the little dissolve, and he has the composer right there to kind of play all the music for it. I just think that's so brilliant. But what I love about that is we actually see how real life works. Like, they can't just write all of this, right? They can't change how certain things play. And the fact that Truman sees Sylvia across the school grounds and just that has that instant connection and falls for her. And that becomes such a key part of the story. And I think that that's so great in his life because of what it represents. And the way that that plays, where when he bumps into her in the library and she's just like, I can't talk to you. I'm not supposed to talk to you. I'm just like, I'm a background actor or whatever she says. Like,
yeah.
That's her world. Like, I am not supposed to have written lines. Like, with the SAG agreement, they're going to have to do new paperwork to get me into the union, because now I'm being written in as I have lines on the show, and that's that's the whole production side of it. But the fact is that that's also not how they scripted it, and I think it plays so perfectly because of how real life just is constantly throwing curveballs that you can't see. And Christoph can't see all of these things.
Do you think her, man, I'm torn, because part of me, I watch this and I think she's an actor who is trying to, at first, increase her presence on screen. Is that bad of me to even imagine that? That she's just like, maybe if I make eyes with Truman, I'll get some lines.
Yeah.
But I don't think it stays that way. I just didn't find her. It's interesting to find, like, he starts flirting with her, and she could have not flirted back, right?
She could have gotten up and walked away.
She could have walked away.
Yeah.
But instead, she wrote, now. We have to go now. And they run down to the beach. Now, or it's never going to happen, she says, something like that, right? And they escape to the beach, and her dad shows up driving on the beach and says she's crazy. This is not the first time. You're not the first. We're moving away. We're going to Fiji.
Yeah.
Which and she's horrified by this. And I think we end up getting it ends up being an authentic moment. She clearly becomes an advocate for Truman. She watches the show all the time. She's rooting for him. And obviously calls the show to levy her, her challenges with what they're doing to Truman. And we get that incredibly pretentious Christoph line when she calls in and he says, no. I love engaging with past cast members. What a jerk. What an incredible ass.
Right. That's so funny.
Yeah.
I also like, just as a side note, that her call to Christoph comes in right after the Hague is calling. I'm like, what is knowing the relationship of the Hague and like history. I think that's such an interesting, like they're calling like human rights and everything. I'm like, it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of his love interests. The other is Meryl, the other side. You already mentioned we had the manufactured meet cute. We also have all of the complications of a developing relationship and then a marriage, and while also being a spokesperson for products in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Which gives us some of, I think, the most wryly funny moments in the movie when she gets to tell Truman, "Hey, Truman, look what I got. It scrapes, it slices, it scoops, it,
Does everything, yeah.
It does everything. Great. That's so great for you." These wonderful moments. What did you think of the fantastic Laura Linney?
I love Laura Linney, and she plays it so well. As somebody who loves Truman, wants to, be part of this world, but only in the scope of, a scripted, safe relationship. And I think that's when things really shift. And I think Laura Linney plays that so well when suddenly Truman is acting out of the ordinary and she doesn't know how to riff on the craziness that he's bringing to it. And he hops in the car and let's drive off, and they spin around the circle a bunch of times, and then they head off one direction, and suddenly Christoph has staged like all this traffic to appear ahead of time. They go back and do the same thing. They go down the same road. He's like, look at that. Nobody's here. And she's clearly breaking and just like trying to figure out how to handle all this. And finally, like that moment where she calls out, like, "Help me," or whatever.
How can I work? It's so unprofessional.
All of it is it plays so well for somebody who's in this world who, I mean, let's face it, it has been relatively safe since she came on. Like, it doesn't seem like anything has really been a big problem since that initial meet cute back in college. And so, I don't know, the decade or so that they've been together probably has been okay, and probably a fairly cushy job for her, just kind of doing the same thing. I mean, granted, it's like 24/7 living here, but still, like, you sign up and it's relatively safe. And suddenly it's not. And I think that's the shift for her that works so well in the scope of the story. My favorite moment of all of this, though, is actually not even her, but it's when Truman follows her to work to see if she's really working at the hospital, and he sees the operating room. You have the doctor, who clearly has never operated on anybody, about to cut into this poor person who's just lying there pretending to be a patient. Oh man, that plays so well. So, and you can see them kind of watching, like, when is he going to finally leave? It's brilliant. Like, I think she does all of it so well. That's one of the things they capture really well with the story.
I do too. And also, yeah, no, I was going to make a Sphere joke. Wasn't Laura Linney in Sphere? I think she's in Sphere.
She was in Congo. I don't think she was in Sphere.
Oh, Congo. You're right. It was Congo. Yeah.
Yeah, which we also talked about on the show.
Yeah, we did. Anyhow, I think that I do think she's great, and I think that the relationship, they also deal with the fact that we never see them having sex, and yet she's talking about having a baby, and I just am trying to imagine the lengths they will go through to make that work so that Truman believes it on a broadcast show. They never show anything, but have Truman and Meryl ever had sex? I assume so.
They've had sex, because they have people talking about it at one point where they're like, "Oh, they never show anything. They always cut to the curtains blowing in the breeze," or things like that.
Right. The security guards are down for any sort of that content. Do you think that fingers crossed is enough to nullify a marriage?
That was an interesting catch, and I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, how did he never notice that when they first got the wedding photos back, and things like that. And it's one of those things. I think I can buy it. It always is one of those moments I'm like, it's not as strong as some of the other elements,
Yeah, it just feels like, what is that? I mean, that's clearly a thing that is important to Truman, that it means something to him. And probably from the perspective of growing up in this teeny tiny town, having not been sort of exposed to broader cultural dynamics, maybe fingers crossed is still an important thing for him as an adult. Yeah. Kind of a stunted adult.
Right. True.
To me, I think it's funny that is something that means so much to him, that he probably believes that it nullifies a contract.
Even if it doesn't nullify a contract, it's just a sign to him that for her, she wasn't taking it seriously, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's going to nullify it or not, I don't know if it really matters as much as how it fits in his scope of the reality of their relationship.
Right. This town, what do we know about this town? And is there really a dome over it?
Seaside, Florida. This is a real town. And I think when Peter Weir, they took a while scouting, trying to find the right place. When he saw it, he's just like, this is it, let's move in. It is a perfect little cookie cutter town that essentially was designed to have this very feeling where you walk in and it's like this master planned community where it just feels like the sort of place it has an old timey sort of feel. It's got the little square and everything. And that's what they were going for with this. And I think it was a perfect location for capturing everything here. I don't believe it has a real dome over it though.
I also don't think it has a dome. However, interesting note that it turns out this house was disgraced Congressman and former Attorney General Matt Gaetz's childhood home.
Correct. Yeah. Isn't that funny?
Yeah. It's really funny. $2.7 million, this house.
Wow.
Now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm not surprised with these master planned communities where the things like this are. And, Florida is a place that has a lot of these sorts of things. I mean, even Disney built Celebration, their own master planned community.
Yeah.
Just, within sight of all the Disney parks down there. So, I mean, it's that whole concept. I think a lot of people genuinely crave that feel of that type of community.
Yeah. Pastel-hued charmer features 4 bedrooms and 4 baths within 2,136 square feet. Apparently, Don and Vicky Gaetz actually have a sign on the white picket fence that says the Truman House. It's very sweet. It's very sweet.
I didn't know they still owned it. That's interesting.
I mean, maybe they didn't take the sign down.
Yeah.
But no.
Well, it is a great location. I do really like this space. And I think the production design, the town, everything pairs so well with this world that Peter Weir is creating. And again, just like with the camera work, finding a way to have cameras just hidden everywhere. Like it's just a really smart way to craft the story and put it together. I genuinely think it just works in such an incredible way.
There is a certain sort of Groundhog Day quaintness to this sort anytime Truman goes to work. And I think I would say my favorite of the encounters that we get with Truman on the street is the twins who are thinking about life insurance every day. That's my favorite. It's my favorite encounter with Community, and also the overhead shot coming from the sign above Truman down on those guys is probably my favorite placement. That they are so eager to always be in the same spot is a really nice touch.
I always like how when they kind of grab Truman and pin him up against the wall, and the camera always pans just enough to reveal the advertisement for the chicken next to where Truman is, where they've held Truman. And I think that's so funny. Like the way that they're always thinking about, okay, how can we get the product placements shown? How can we get the advertisements shown? And just like all of that, I think is just so perfectly crafted.
Yeah, it really is.
What else? Other cast or crew with this? This was, it's an interesting journey with this one because Andrew Niccol was originally wanting to direct it himself, and it was a darker story. It took place in New York, And I think when, they felt, we might have talked about this a little bit when we were talking about Simone, but this would have actually been his directorial debut. And they were like, it's a little too much, because I think they had budgeted $80 million at the time for this, and like, too much for a new director. And so they paid him some more money to have him step aside. They were talking to Brian De Palma for a while to direct this. And then after he left, they were talking about possibly Tim Burton, Sam Raimi, Terry Gilliam, David Cronenberg, Barry Sonnenfeld, Steven Spielberg. A lot of interesting names. I can kind of see versions of this under each of those people. Like each of them could make an interesting version of this.
That's actually fascinating. I can even see a Cronenberg version of this.
Right. It would be really interesting. I think that would be cool.
Tim Burton would be Scissorhands.
Right. He's totally already down for that style of Community. And then finally, Peter Weir signed on. And I think, and he had seen Jim Carrey in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective and said, this guy is like a Charlie Chaplin sort of performer, and I want him to play in this. And they signed him, but he was already committed to The Cable Guy and Liar Liar. And instead of finding a new actor, Peter Weir said, I want to wait. And so they waited for over a year before Jim Carrey was available so that they could do this. And in that time, he had Andrew Niccol rework the script like 12 to 16 times, trying to find the right tone, because he didn't want it dark like it was originally slated to be. Yeah. He said, I want this to feel like a show that people would actually watch regularly. And so they found kind of the more bright tone for the story. And I think it worked. But it's an interesting journey to see this kind of finally coming around to getting the team that it had.
Well, and we haven't mentioned anything about Jim Carrey.
Yeah,
yet, right. Like, where were you on your Jim Carrey journey when you saw this movie? What did it do for you?
Well, I think I mean you're the one to ask, because I think you had a real connection to what Jim Carrey was doing at this particular point in his career with Ace Ventura and Dumb and Dumber and Liar Liar, Cable Guy. And I really enjoyed Jim Carrey. I thought he was a lot of fun. He was an actor who was regularly talking about how he wanted to have the Tom Hanks path, start in comedy and move into more serious projects. And this was really that first opportunity he had to do something a little more serious. And there's still certainly quite a bit of that kind of the goofy Jim Carrey-ness in it, but nowhere near like you get in Ace Ventura or Dumb and Dumber. And I think that he proved himself, and I really enjoy what he does here. And he is one of those actors who I'm like, with this and Man in the Moon, those are kind of his big dramatic roles around this time. And I think that he easily could have kind of continued down that road had he, I don't know. I don't know if he was just kind of shifting and trying to find the right path for himself or what, but I think he very easily could have continued down the road more. I mean, he did have more with like the Number 23 and the Majestic and things like that, but that direction never seemed to completely take off for him. And now he's kind of retired and doing art and pops up in the Sonic movies is kind of what it seems to be his where he is these days.
Yeah, I mean, really, who can blame him? And I have not seen a single Sonic movie, but my understanding is his Robotnik is pretty great.
Yeah, very fun.
He's such an interesting guy, and I was definitely in the bag for Jim Carrey in this era because, this was all before. This was before the stuff that he was doing, the Cable Guy and Liar Liar and Dumb and Dumber, and even Batman Forever. I thought his Riddler was actually really great in Batman Forever. The Mask, of course, was kind of the big one because back in the day, I had a reasonable facsimile impersonation of Carrey's The Mask. And I also think people forget his long run. Nearly 5 years run on In Living Color, which is an underappreciated sketch comedy show of the era. And I think it was really great. And had legs. He has some really enduring characters that directly influenced so many of the characters and faces he did on screen. But we get the Truman Show, and that gives us some of his, it gives us a chance for him to leave everything, on the field, right? To really do something different. We get a little bit of his comedy. We get some of the faces, hello, good evening, and good night. We get all of those kinds of things. But that leads to stuff like Man on the Moon, which was extraordinary. His and quite deeply damaging to him personally. Me, Myself, and Irene, tough movie to watch. But Bruce Almighty gets us back to some of his sweeter comedy. Like, I actually think this era of him from the 90s through the early 2000s was just some of his greatest work. And, you're right. The Number 23 is out there, and it's a good movie. But from then on, he's a different kind of actor. I liked Yes Man to some degree. Mr. Popper's Penguins was pretty great. But then he was just a different kind of actor. And he has definitely entered a different phase in his life. And I look at him, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, of course, is the other one that I pair with this as kind of my favorite efforts of Carrey's to show different sides of his humanity. And he clearly has many of them. He's a complicated guy, and I really like what he has put on film.
Yeah.
I don't know if I wish he'd had an easier run of it or a better run of it. He's clearly had a great show. I mean, he's got 67 credits in his career. It is a notable career with some incredible highs and some, again, enduring character work. And I also feel like he arrived at it through a lot of pain.
Yeah, but I think, to your point, films like this will always stand out as, highlights of what he's done. I think it's just going to be easy to always look back and say this was one of the greats that he was in. And so, yeah.
He also has a banger of a Joe Biden impression on SNL. So we'll always have Carrey's Joe Biden.
We'll always have that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think of Peter Weir? I think we've only talked about Gallipoli before in our 1981 series. Do you where do you stand with him and his career?
I'm very fond of Peter Weir. My Peter Weir is Dead Poets Society Peter Weir. So, I'm that guy. I'm also a Witness guy. I like Witness and The Way Back. I have seen Mosquito Coast. I've seen the show, the films of Peter Weir. I think before I was really tracking, this is a Peter Weir movie. I was watching Peter Weir movies. So I know he came to this at a real high point in his own career. Like he was a guy who was kind of already legendary, and I can't think of a Peter Weir movie I haven't liked, except for this is okay. I gotta say it out loud. I've never seen Master and Commander.
What? Oh, Pete.
I don't need to say it again. I've said it once. It's okay.
You would love it. It is such a great film. You need to remedy that right quick.
Yeah.
Because it's such a strong film. And really kind of after Truman Show, he really slowed down, right? I mean, it was like Truman Show in 98 and then Master and Commander in 2003, The Way Back in 2010, and he retired.
Yeah.
It was really the bulk from the 70s into the early 90s when he was busiest. But I mean, I like you, the bulk of the projects I've seen of his, which is I've seen most of his films, I really enjoy.
Yeah.
He is an interesting director where I don't know if I can say there's a Peter Weir style, there's a Peter Weir tone that I'm capturing. His stories seem very different, but I genuinely like most of the movies that I've seen of his.
It's funny because I agree with you, but the other way I think works. Like if I tell you Fearless, Green Card, Dead Poets Society, Mosquito Coast, etc., if I start with the movies and then say Peter Weir directed those, I'm not surprised. But if you ask me to tell you what are all the films Peter Weir directed, I don't know that I could tell you why they feel like a Peter Weir stamp.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, incredible craft. And we're definitely in the bag for Gallipoli on this show for sure. Worth listening to. I think that was a great conversation. And maybe we could use a Peter Weir series at some point in the future.
Yeah, we definitely need to get you to see Master and Commander. And if that's what it's going to take.
That would be the anchor. That would be the anchor. What is it's British ships at sea? That kind of thing? Is he chasing pirates?
Yeah. It's not chasing pirates. They're exploring, and it's based on a huge series of books. And I'm surprised that you haven't read, because it seems like that would be all right up your alley too. But just like they're ship battle books, really,
Okay.
And they end up facing some pretty tough opponents in Master and Commander. So it's not
at a
pirates,
minimum a series about ships at sea. I could get down with that.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. All right.
All right, well, let's move. I think that's it. So let's move into the back half. But first, let's take a quick break.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. Music by Sabutan, Young Rich Pixies, Oriole Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at d-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show and the full archive at truestory.fm. You can follow us from there too. Plus, you can find out how to become a member and go further with every episode. Check out our merch store at thenextreel.com/merch. And if your app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. All right, Andy. Sequels and remakes.
Believe it or not,
Wow.
Andrew Weir has been talking a bit. Recently, it's been coming up about doing a sequel show to The Truman Show. I'm going to read you his pitch. There has been talk of doing a musical, believe it or not, or a series. When it's a different art form, I don't think it takes anything away from the original. In my version of a series, I thought it would be fun if after Truman walked through the sky, the audience clamored for more, which you sense at the end of the film. I imagine there would be a network with multiple channels, all starring a subject born on the show. If I set it in New York City, there would be a girl living in the Upper East Side, a boy from Harlem, a kid from Chinatown, etc. Since they are all on their own channel and move in their own circles, they are never meant to meet. But at the end of the first season, the boy from Harlem and the rich girl find themselves drawn to each other. They both sense that the other is acting differently from anyone they've ever met, because for the first time, they've met someone who is not acting. In the second season, the network would desperately try to kill off their romance. So, I don't know. I think it's best left alone. I appreciate Andrew Niccol is trying to find opportunities and probably being asked regularly, as studios are these days, what about a sequel to this? What about follow up to that? Like, I'm sure that, he already is doing Lords of War, the sequel to Lord of War. So I just hope that it never happens. I feel like it just doesn't need it.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know what? Here's the problem about the world I live in. I don't think it needs it. I don't think it needs to happen, but I'd watch it.
And then at the end you'd say, well, let's see what else is on.
Yeah. All right. How to do at award season. Let me see. Should I refresh my tea? This is a list.
Yeah. 42 wins with 69 other nominations. Definitely a popular one. Over at the Oscars, Ed Harris was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but lost to James Coburn in Affliction. This was the Oscars where they gave an honorary Oscar to Elia Kazan, and they cut to Ed Harris not applauding when Kazan came out. It was very controversial Oscars. Steven Spielberg beat out Peter Weir for Best Director for Saving Private Ryan, and lost Best Original Screenplay to Shakespeare in Love. Over at the Saturn Awards, it won Best Fantasy Film. Jim Carrey was nominated for Best Actor, but lost to, get this, James Woods in Vampires. What were they thinking? Oh, that movie. I do not like that.
Oh my God.
Ed Harris was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but lost to Ian McKellen in Apt Pupil. Best Director, Peter Weir lost to Michael Bay in Armageddon.
What?
And it did win Best Writer. Yeah, there are some crazy picks over there in the Saturn
This is
Awards.
crazy.
I know. At the BAFTAs, it was nominated for Best Film, but lost to Shakespeare in Love. Won Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Production Design. Ed Harris was again nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but lost to Jeffrey Rush in Shakespeare in Love. Best Cinematography lost to Elizabeth, and Best Special Effects lost to Saving Private Ryan. And then, of course, the Golden Globes. It was nominated for Best Motion Picture Drama, but lost to Saving Private Ryan. Peter Weir again lost Best Director to Steven Spielberg for Saving Private Ryan. And Best Screenplay lost to Shakespeare in Love, but it did win Best Actor in a Drama for Jim Carrey. Ed Harris won Best Supporting Actor, and it won Best Original Score. So, there you go.
Okay. I that's fair. It sounds like the lesson learned is if you want to hit that Oscar high note, don't come out in a year with Saving Private Ryan.
That was a trick for sure.
How
Or
to do
Shakespeare in
box
Love,
office.
which is kind of
Or
dominant.
Shakespeare in Love, yeah.
Yeah.
Controversial on all points. Like when you
Yeah.
look back at any of these wins, do you feel like these are good wins? Do you think that Truman Show should have had more affection from any of these that they lost?
Yeah, I do. I mean, at the Oscars, for sure, I have a hard time not seeing it nominated for Best Picture. Best Picture was Shakespeare in Love, Elizabeth, Life is Beautiful, Saving Private Ryan, The Thin Red Line. I mean, we talked about Life is Beautiful, and that was that crazy one with Roberto Benigni that certainly has a lot of hate. Today, I would put Truman Show up in place of that. I think the other nominees are all stellar and certainly worth being there.
Yeah.
This was one of those years where The Truman Show was the film that didn't get Best Picture, or it didn't get Best Picture, but it got Best Director. Man, Saving Private Ryan, I haven't watched that in ages. Would I still pick Spielberg over Peter Weir? That's a tough one for me. I don't know. But here's the thing. Best Actor. Would you have put Jim Carrey in the lineup? I mean, Roberto Benigni, Life is Beautiful. I feel like, sure. Okay, easy to just take that one out and put Jim Carrey in.
Yeah.
Sure, why not? Tom Hanks, Saving Private Ryan. Ian McKellen, Gods and Monsters. Nick Nolte, Affliction. Edward Norton, American History X. I mean, it's a solid lineup. But yeah, I would say take Benigni out and put Carrey in.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's the cruel irony of that year, because not only did Benigni win because he was nominated, he was also a lousy winner.
Oh, he was very fun. Everyone loved him.
Really?
He's like jumping on chairs.
I know.
Everyone loved it.
Enough with the chair jumping, Benigni. Enough.
Oh, anyway. So yeah, that's the awards.
Okay. How did it do at the box office?
For Weir's film, he had a budget of $60 million, or $116.4 million in today's dollars. The movie opened June 5th, 1998, opposite A Perfect Murder and the limited release of Beyond Silence. See, I guarantee that we saw this together and A Perfect Murder probably the same weekend.
Yeah.
This opened in the #1 spot, which it held for 2 weeks, finally getting bumped to third by The X-Files and Mulan, two other movies we saw together.
Probably that same weekend.
Yeah, probably that same weekend. This stayed in the top 10 for 7 weeks and went on to earn $125.6 million domestically and $138.5 million internationally for a total gross of $512.4 million in today's dollars. All told, that means the film did quite well for itself, earning back more than 4 times its budget and landing with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $3.8 million. A great spot to land for Weir and Carrey.
Well, I'll tell you what, this movie, my goodness, I really enjoy it. It is a film whose entire change arc is about discovering that his consent ends up being his to take back. And that's a really great lesson. And it's just about him looking for the door. And that is a simple and beautiful journey for this character. And I had a blast revisiting this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it feels so relevant, like more and more relevant every time that I watch it. And it's just crazy that when the movie came out, the cultural zeitgeist was already pushing toward these stories. Because I mentioned earlier, EdTV came out this same year. And all of that grew into such this massive reality TV thing where eventually our country is being run by a reality TV star. So
peak idiocracy is what we've done. We did it. We created it.
Yeah. Oh, one last thing as a side note. Did you see that there is now something called the Truman Show delusion?
Is that like spotlight syndrome?
I don't know what spotlight syndrome is, but this is people who, it's not, I guess, officially listed in the medical books,
Like
but
the
it is
DSM,
people who believe their lives are reality TV shows, and they think they're being followed by hidden cameras. There was one guy who apparently even went to the Statue of Liberty to climb it to the top, thinking that he was going to finally be reunited with his high school girlfriend and get released from his responsibilities with the show. Like, it's crazy that there's actually this delusion that is out there. Yeah.
No, it's not the same thing. I think spotlight syndrome is essentially narcissism. Like, you just think you're the center of the universe, but not that you're being followed by cameras.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Andrew
Okay,
Nichols
good to
said,
know.
"You know you've made it when you've had a disease named after you."
Yeah. Good grief.
Yeah. Crazy. All right.
All right.
Well, that is it for our conversation about The Truman Show. Next week, we are looking at Dan Gilroy's Nightcrawler, starring Jake Gyllenhaal as a nighttime freelance cameraman in L.A. who chases crime and accident scenes for the local news, with Rene Russo as the news director willing to buy whatever he brings back, and Riz Ahmed along for the ride. If Truman didn't know he was being watched, Nightcrawler is about a man who knows exactly how the camera works and uses that knowledge to claw his way up. All right, let's do our ratings.
All right, Andy, letterboxd.com/the next reel. That's where you can find our HQ page where we have our reviews and ratings for all the films we talk about on the Next Reel family of film podcasts. What are you going to do for this one?
I really I think this movie is just so well crafted and well put together. With that, I'm still at 4.5, which is pretty high. 4.5 out of 5. I know.
Do I have to ask the question that's going to come next?
I don't know why. It just feels like a 4.5. Isn't that how this works?
Here's my central problem, and I say it also. I looked at my initial. I've never reviewed this film in Letterboxd. I've never written a review for it. I just marked it as watched and put some stars on it when you first got me into Letterboxd, and I was doing that like rapid fire, and I had put this in at 4 stars, and
okay.
I can't answer the question why, and so I am revising it up to 5 stars. It's a 5-star film for me. It's 100% a 5-star film for me. I can't think of a reason to degrade it in any way. Because I have the same experience watching it every time. It feels like a new movie to me every time I see it, and I get such joy out of introducing it to other people. Like, this is an awesome, awesome story, and it's executed very, very well. So, yeah, 5 stars.
5 stars and a heart. Fantastic. Well, that averages out to 4.75, which will round up to 5 stars and a heart anyway, so you still get your win, Pete. You can find the show on Letterboxd at The Next Reel. You can find me there at Soda Creek Film, and Pete at Pete Wright. So what did you think about The Truman Show? We would love to hear your thoughts. Hop into the Show Talk channel over in our Discord community, where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd get it, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
All right. There are some good gags in the Letterboxd about this movie. What did you do? What did you do with your review?
I went just right to the top. The easy ones. I picked the most liked review by Shay, 5 stars and a heart. If I lived in a town where everyone looked like a Republican, I'd want to leave too.
I think we went with a similar vibe. I went with a 4-star and a heart from Jay, who said, poor guy's going to leave a world where everything revolved around him to learn about taxes. Begs the question, do you think he had to pay taxes in his little town? Is there stuff like, what is his blind spot? Do you think he got to learn about everything in the real world?
That's actually funny, because do you think that he's owned by a corporation, but theoretically, is he still considered somebody who has to pay taxes? So on the show, like, does he go meet a tax accountant and actually go through the process of filing his real taxes without realizing that they're actually going to the real, like, he thinks they're going to the government, and they are, but he's only doing it for the reality of having to do it for the real world.
Right. And part of it, is like, what do you think selectively that they could have just removed from the Truman universe because it's complicated and you're not going to learn about it? Like, you don't need to be exposed to, you know, STDs under the dome. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
like,
I was thinking about that, like crime, like does he even know what crime is? Because obviously it's just a bunch of actors doing stuff. Or do they perform? Has there been performative crime in context of the show? So he knows that crime is a real thing. I mean, in Andrew Nichols' darker script, it was a much darker world with all of these sorts of things. But it does make you wonder, like in this little peaceful seaside town, is he completely oblivious to all of this stuff?
Yeah. I think that's a really, why didn't we spend the last hour really litigating that stuff? Thanks, Letterboxd.